Long ago in ye-olden days of the channel, I made a video calculating the feats and abilities of Maka Albarn. In that video, I discussed just about everything that there was to talk about her, from her offensive power to her ability to see souls. There was nothing that I left out. However, then a few months later, I noticed a tiny, maybe massive mistake that I made. I saw that I had missed some rather important feats. So that is what we're here to rectify. This time, I will not stop until I've calculated Maka's true power, speed, and durability. Though durability kind of fits into her power, but anyways, it's not the point. So prepare yourself to be informed as we recalculate the powers and abilities of Maka Albarn. Hello Internet, Jojo here, and welcome to Ideashock. As I said a few seconds ago, we're going to be fixing some of the mistakes that I made back in my first Maka video. Normally in these types of videos, we would start off by calculating power, but for this video, we're going to go a bit out of order and find Maka's best speed first. And just so you know, it gets pretty crazy. The first feat that I want to bring to your attention is when Maka and Soul dodge a laser. This is actually a feat that, for multiple reasons, I decided not to include in my first How Strong is Maka video, because I was unconvinced that these lasers were moving at light speed. At the time, light speed seemed to be far outside what even the strongest Soul Eater characters could do. However, a bit later, I was reading Fire Force, which is by the same author, and came across a character that is, without a doubt, firing lasers. To my surprise, the lasers from Soul Eater and the lasers from Fire Force looked practically identical. You see, in both series, when a character is firing a laser, the source of the laser is a floating circle with the beams firing out of it. Just looking at these two panels, and it's not hard to come to the conclusion that they look almost identical to one another. These two panels was actually what got me to start over and take a second look at Maka's abilities. I can now say, without a doubt in my mind, that there are several characters that can, in fact, move at relativistic speeds. Now, as Maka is flying up to the moon, this moon-headed guy fires a beam of moonlight at her and she dodges it. By comparing the source of the lasers to Maka in this panel, and then comparing that to Maka in this other panel, we find that she's about 6.214374 meters from the approximate location of the lasers. While moving at light speed, these beams would take about 20 nanoseconds to reach her, and so that is the time that she must have had to have reacted in. As to an actual numerical speed, Maka and Soul were able to move out of the way of the beam. If we use where several of the beams intersect, as where Soul and Maka are moving from, we end up with them moving about 165 centimeters in order to get out of the way. To do this, they must have been moving at a massive 178,371,000 miles per hour, Mach 282,000, or 26.6% the speed of light. This is oceans greater than what I calculated for Maka previously. But this is not Maka's only feat around this speed. Just a bit later, Maka is able to slice this villain, who is that same moon-headed bad dude, this octopus guy, and this possibly too explicit for YouTube whammon villain, all merged together. After Soul uses his soul hack ability, which is probably as overpowered as it sounds, Soul fires these lasers at this composite villain. This villain is fast enough to deflect the beam from a very short distance. Using the width of Soul in his scythe form and the height of Kaguya, well, I almost want to call her a stripper, but she has no actual clothes in the first place to strip off, because she's some sort of madness demon thing. Soul Eater's weird. Using these two as rulers, and we find that Maka, and by proxy the source of the lasers, is about 22.73 meters away. This monster is able to block these lasers by moving roughly 1.5 meters, putting her at 44,248,400 miles per hour, or about 6% the speed of light. Considering that Maka lands the killing blow directly on her, Maka is definitely a bit faster than this. Now, we know that Maka is the slowest of the main trio, that is, until she goes into her black dress form. Let me just say, this dress is one of my favorite power-ups ever. It's just a really cool mix of classy and battle ready. After Maka does this, she is more than able to keep up with characters like Blackstar and the newly born Grim Reaper. Blackstar, for one, is fast enough and strong enough to physically grab two of these same beams, making a very strong argument that he's light speed. And as Maka in her black dress is relatively on par with him, she should be around light speed as well. With that, we finished calculating Maka's speed, and I think that we all know what we're going to be discussing next. Subscribing, obviously. Honestly, I don't like putting these in the middle of videos. I feel like it breaks the flow. However, if I don't put it here, then I will certainly forget to do it at all. So, if you're new, first, let me just say thank you for watching my videos, and if you like these videos, then it proves you have good taste, so please subscribe. If you are already subscribed, then can I just ask that you check your notifications and turn them on? I don't know if it does anything, but I feel like not everyone is getting notified when I release a video. If you could, please just check and make sure that YouTube is doing its job and telling you when I release a video. That'd be great. Thanks. Also, if you want to share this with a friend, or, do what I do and force your family to watch it, that'd be great as well. With that said, let's talk about power. When Maka was getting her soul hijacked by this clown, she was able to resonate with Soul and cause a massive explosion that melted all these metal pipes. Using Maka as a ruler, we find these pipes are about 20 inches in diameter and about 33 feet high. Pipes with this diameter weigh around 78.6 pounds per foot. So, reverse engineering this and accounting for the fact that there are 10 pipes here, we find this explosion melted about 25,996 pounds of metal, or 11,791 kilograms. Considering that it takes 420 joules per kilogram to raise the steel's temperature by 1 degree, and it still melts at about 1,427 degrees, we find that Maka had to have produced about 7 billion joules of energy, or over 7,000 megajoules. However, that's not the max it could be. You see, how power is judged in this world is by looking at the size of the person's soul. So, comparing Maka's soul here to its size by the end of the story, and we find that her soul is about twice the volume, meaning that Maka's anti-demon wavelength should be able to produce about 14,694 megajoules of this type of energy. But this is not even close to her max power. In the last video, I calculated this attack for when she fought Gopher. Looking at this again, I saw something that I missed. In this panel, we see that this blasts a hole in the mountain, but what I did not see was in the next panel, the entire top of the mountain is gone. The second thing I did wrong here was compare the mountain to Maka. I assumed that she was right next to it when she's not. Luckily, this time I saw this tree. Because the DWMA is in Nevada, this tree is most likely a pinyon pine tree. This type of tree grows in the mountains and extends to about 7 feet tall. Using this and outlining the mountain as a cone, we get a destroyed volume of 8.95 billion cubic centimeters. Multiplying this by 2 for the second mountain, and using a violent fragmentation value of 69 joules per cubic centimeter, this attack must have generated over 295 tons of TNT. Because Maka cut an identical attack in half, this means that she must be able to generate near that energy. However, we still got several more feats to calculate before we get to her true max. This next feat is when Maka used sound waves to blast and affect a sky whale, but when she does this, she also ended up blasting these clouds away. Using this image and comparing the empty space in the clouds to Maka, and we find that the total volume of clouds she moved is about 986,677 cubic meters. Considering the weight of the average cloud is about 1.003 kilograms per cubic meter, and she moved 989,637 kilograms. Maka is using sound waves to move these clouds, and sound moves at about 343 meters per second. This means the clouds must have covered the radius of the circle, 4,000 centimeters, in 0.117649 seconds, giving an acceleration around 2,915 meters per second squared. With this cloud's weight and acceleration, it must have a force of over 2.885 billion newtons, displacing that by the radius of the hole, and she must have generated a total of 27.827 tons of TNT. But that's just the initial energy. Maka maintained this for several seconds. By counting the words and using a moderate speaking pace, as well as adding the length of a whale cry into this, and we find that she maintained it for about 25 seconds. Because she generated about 27 tons of TNT in 0.11 seconds, she must be generating a total of 236.5 tons of TNT per second. This means that for 25 seconds, she had to have generated a total of 5,913 tons of TNT, or just under 6 kilotons. This was almost the last feat that I wanted to talk about, but then I got a comment not too long ago reminding me that Maka scales to Krona, and Krona dissolved an entire city. Now, because this feat is a feat from the Black Blood, it will likely work as both offense and defense. As a final test for Krona, Medusa had him go fight a strong Mycerne weapon in the Ukraine. This fight ended when Krona unleashed an ability that encapsulated the entire city in a sphere of black blood and then dissolved it. For the record, regardless of what they call it, this is not dissolving. Dissolving requires everything to break down and become indistinguishable from the liquid. What happens here is just kind of mushing, so we're going to use the numbers of pulverization. Using pixel measurements, we can compare this sphere to the buildings in the area and find that this sphere has a diameter of 2,965 feet. Then, using a variety of other measurements, we find that the volume of the part of the sphere that is below ground level takes up about 130 trillion cubic centimeters. Now, the way it's described, we are to assume that everything in this area has been dissolved, including the foundation of the city. Hard compacted dirt has a compressive strength of about 1 megapascal or 1 joule per cubic centimeter. It's pretty weak, but this is still enough mass to generate an excessive amount of energy. Multiplying the affected area's volume by 1 megapascal, and we find that Krona's black blood must be able to generate a whopping 31.2338 kilotons of TNT. Yet, we're still not done yet, because when Maka lands a final hit on the Kishin, we see the extent of his black blood. The black blood sprays out of him and covers the entire moon. For the record, this moon is incredibly small. I mean, by comparing the characters to the teeth and then the teeth to the full moon, it comes to be about 346 meters in diameter. That is about 3.8 football fields, or for those of you outside the US, 4 football fields. Finding the volume of this moon is actually very complicated, so let's just say that we calculate the moon's volume in a similar way to how one would calculate the volume of a lemon wedge. Using a spherical wedge calculator, I found that this segment of the moon had a volume of 4.6761 trillion cubic centimeters of moon rock. Then I measured the nose and these spikes separately to give us a total volume of 5.3631 trillion cubic centimeters. This is actually less destroyed volume than when Krona destroyed this town, but this is far more impressive because of the strength of moon rock. Now, in my video on Maka before, we discussed the shear of moon rock, but I'd like to explain it here better. I found the numbers for moon rock by taking this 95 megapascals here and this 153 megapascals here, averaged them together and got 124. Now, in general, if you know the tensile strength, or in many cases the compressive strength, you can multiply that by 0.577 to find the shear strength of that material. Of course, this is not always the case, but there's very little information on this particular topic. So, multiplying that average 124 megapascals by 0.577, and we get a shear strength of 71.5 megapascals. But for consistency's sake, we'll just call it a shear strength of 71 megapascals. Of course, we're not going to be using the shear strength of moon rock, but the compressive strength, also known as the pulverization strength. As I said before, this rock has a shear strength of 124 megapascals. Taking this and multiplying it by the volume, we find that Ashura's black blood must be able to generate 158.845 kilotons of TNT. This amount of power does seem to be her limit, as when she lands this attack on Ashura, it draws out every bit of her black blood to her scythe, leaving her dress white. Guys, that was a lot of very calculation-dense feats. I hope that in some way this makes up for my mistake the first time around with Maka. Being one of my favorite series, I really wanted to get it right. I mean, you guys have no idea how much agonizing I do when I discover that I was wrong about something. Like, anything. Calculating feats and getting them right is my one job here. So, that said guys, as always, thanks for watching, see you next time, remember to stay spectacular, JoJo, out.
You, serial killer Jack the Ripper. Your murdering days are done. Your soul is mine!